Allow me to address the elephant in the room before he makes himself known. If you're a fan of 2064 Read-Only Memories, a cyberpunk visual novel released in 2015 to mostly positive reviews and an arguably limited audience, and you've come to this review to understand how a sequel coming 8 years later compares to the original, you may be disappointed. Though Read-Only Memories NeuroDiver's brand new story doesn't require knowledge of its predecessor to understand, I never played the original game, though it's oddly been in my backlog for almost as many years as it's been out. Those damn Humble Bundles, am I right? I don't even tend to play visual novels all that much, but as a staunch fan of both narrative-heavy games and cyberpunk themes, it's hard not to be intrigued by the game's unique premise, ostensibly mixing the character-driven, slice-of-life tendencies of something like Coffee Talk with the psyche-exploring zaniness of Psychonauts to, well, arguably mixed effect. But before I get there, allow me to neuro-dive into the reasons you should consider a membership to the I Dream of Indie Games Patreon. You'll not only be helping to support coverage of independent titles you don't know you love yet, but also get cool perks like Discord community access, an exclusive podcast, and free games depending on your membership tier. Now, back to Read-Only Memories NeuroDiver, or just NeuroDiver as I'll call it from here on out to save us some time and sanity. As I was saying, the premise here is an intriguing one. You play as Luna Cruz de la Vega, who's more commonly known throughout the game by the name ES-88. ES-88 is a psychic of sorts, who, with the help of her trusty, weird, squid, snake sort of thing called a NeuroDiver, can enter the depths of people's memories and fix the bits that have been fragmented into obscurity for one reason or another. In her opening NeuroDive, for example, which largely acts as a tutorial, you'll go inside the memories of a man named Crow, who distinctly remembers a job he pulled off with his friends where he gave them his share of the profit, but according to them, he took it all for himself. Your job is to go in, review the fragmented memories, and figure out the truth. This opening level set a strong stage for what was to come, as discovering the source of Crow's confusion through the defragmenting of his memories was compelling enough to hook me in. To the surprise of literally no one, any visual novel needs to have a strong story and interesting characters that grab us from scene to scene and make us want to know what happens next, which is why it's unfortunate that NeuroDive's strong opening was followed by a few hours of casual psychic meandering with only occasional hints at its initial creativity before coming to a quick, albeit pretty clever, end. But let me not get too ahead of myself, as calling this a visual novel is a mostly accurate but still reductive take. Most of the game does exist in a purely narrative form, where some simple, mostly inconsequential dialogue decisions and clicks through various locations will be the extent of the interactivity it has to offer. You'll spend a large chunk of its time navigating the very few rooms of the Minerva facility where ES-88 works, and interacting with our coworkers in what looks like a fairly large and mostly empty building. ES-88 not only works at Minerva but lives there as well, with her visits off campus to the heart of Neo-San Francisco being few and far between. While the slice-of-life cadence of ES-88's story adds some character development and sense of place, NeuroDiver's core gameplay comes in the form of these NeuroDives themselves. For reasons nobody would benefit from me spoiling in this review, a variety of scenes in the game will require you to dig into a character's memories and repair the bits that have been corrupted. This is where NeuroDiver can be a mix of a totally average point-and-click adventure, and on occasion, a needlessly frustrating one. Some of its memory-repairing pseudo-puzzles can be reasonably fun to figure out, even if the actual figuring out part wouldn't make a single one of your neurons sweat. That's not where the frustration comes into play. Instead, it's from that part of a point-and-click adventure where you've seemingly talked to each character a dozen times, explored every location, and clicked seemingly everywhere, yet still aren't quite sure where to go. NeuroDiver definitely has a problem with this, as a moderate chunk of my just over 5-hour playtime to hit the credits required some truly aimless wandering before clicking that one bundle of pixels I kept happening to miss. Unfortunately, this occasionally obtuse nature is hardly the only place NeuroDiver faltered for me. The beginning and end of the story were quite strong, but like an Oreo whose cream filling has been replaced with plain Greek yogurt, what's in between is arguably a bit bland. Even the best premise requires strong writing and world building to get you properly hooked, and NeuroDiver is only about halfway there. The writing itself is passable. It's not taking the crowns of Disco Elysium or Citizen Sleeper anytime soon, and I feel like I've already forgotten most of its characters. But its story is well constructed and didn't make me cringe, which I know isn't uniformly complimentary, but has an air of compliment nevertheless. The world building is where the game stumbles the most for me though, and the reason it was at times more of a sleep aid for me than an edge-of-your-seat sci-fi thriller. I was consistently disappointed at how often NeuroDiver missed opportunities to teach us more about its world or the people in it. Like any point-and-click, exploration comes in the form of being able to click on objects and people on the screen and learn a bit more about them, whether relevant to the main story or not. But time and time again, this potential is squandered when ES-88 refuses to do more than comment about how fancy a sink looks or how much she enjoys the view from her balcony. While not universally the case, it felt like more often than not, ES-88 just didn't have much to say about the world around her. and by the last act of the game, clicking on objects not relevant to the plot wouldn't even get you an observation or a comment, but a simple ellipse that began to feel more like a placeholder than a conscious design choice. The result of NeuroDiver's lack of enthusiasm for its own world was that I wasn't especially enthusiastic either, and all its other cracks became a bit more pronounced. For example, it's hard to ignore the fact that Minerva, a supposedly high-powered big deal of a corporation, seemingly has almost nobody working at it. There are only a small handful of rooms to visit within the facility, and even the large ones are almost completely bereft of life, with only 4 of ES-88's coworkers and a robot receptionist ever visibly present. More characters show up throughout the game, granted, but the Minerva building itself feels devoid of life or personality in a way that limits its believability in the plot. To give credit where it's due though, while I wasn't particularly enthusiastic about NeuroDiver by the time its ending rolled around, it definitely woke me up. I was not expecting where the story was going, and the way it wrapped up is easily the most satisfying part about it. In retrospect, seeing how well thought out the ending was made me wish the journey there had that same amount of intrigue and care, but alas, while nothing about it was remotely bad, a majority of NeuroDiver felt like going through the motions, and I can't help but feel that its especially creative concept demanded more than that. I hoped for a little more from its presentation as well, but this is where everyone's mileage is certainly going to vary. Its retro pixel art visual style is colorful and comes with some interesting character designs, but some of its environments, especially within the Minerva facility, feel cold and lacking in detail, which you could argue is an intentional design choice, but as a means to what end exactly? At least it runs well on the Steam Deck though, which is the way I played through most of it. Sound design is similarly a mixed bag, with high quality voice acting throughout most of the game, but music that was forgettable and perhaps a bit too minimalistic for its own good. Again though, these things are super subjective, and I fully suspect folks obsessed with retro aesthetics will find plenty to love here. I only found a little bit to love in NeuroDiver overall though. Having not played its predecessor, it's unfortunately impossible for me to compare, but I've got to wonder if this really is the game that fans of the original have been waiting 8 years for. Its sci-fi premise has a lot going for it, but the execution feels like it lacks the intrigue the game clearly wants to have. Fans of retro aesthetics, cyberpunk vibes, and visual novels may very well find a title worth their time here, but others may want to wait for a sale or give it a pass.
Oh no!
Pretty strange. But they're an Esper like me, so we have some kind of a bond? Oh no, did I hurt their feelings?